So we have talked about setting up an opposing force, a villain, how we can do it well. But what happens when instead you do the exact opposite? Instead of introducing a intimidated villain with a powerful army, cause you to fear them, what if instead you set up a clunky monster with an army that can't shoot well? AK, what happened with Star Wars. Now that we've had some time for all the haters to click off, because they can't stand anyone saying anything bad about Star Wars, let me start explaining. For those who have been following this channel for a little bit now, you probably have picked up already that I am not a fan of Star Wars. I have mentioned it hundreds of times. But probably have seen in one video that I did mention I was defending A New Hope and explaining how it's better than the sequel Star Wars trilogy with setting up its world and all. Well, I'm not a fan of the original Star Wars, and I think the world building is terrible. It is better than the sequel Star Wars, but the fact of the matter is, I would love to hear some Star Wars fans try to argue with me against this. But, honestly, and I'm gonna say it clear as day, and you're gonna hate me for it, Darth Vader is a terrible villain. He's not intimidated one bit in the original trilogy. There, I've said it. Most of you guys have probably clicked off already. For those who have decided that they're going to stick through this and hear what I have to say, let me explain. Let's start by just looking over the opening scene and see what I'm talking about. So we open with this small spaceship being chased by this ginormous monster of a ship. And it's shooting at them, and then it eventually captures them and sucks them into their bigger spaceship. You hear all these noises, and you see all the rebels just like with their guns like raised, you know. And then the stormtroopers come in, and there's smoke everywhere, and the stormtroopers attack. They're shooting. They're barely hitting anyone, and a lot of the stormtroopers are being nailed down. But eventually, the rebels have to retreat. And then you see Darth Vader walk in all his clunky glory. And yes, I will talk about how much I hate his suit later on. And then it cuts to Leia. She's adding a message into her droid to give to this Obi-Wan Kenobi to say, hey, we need help. Then it cuts back to Vader choking this guy and trying to get something out of him. And then eventually the droid manages to escape. And Leia gets captured. And that's basically the opening scene that we're going to be talking about. So what can we learn from this, right? So we learned that these rebels are trying to get away with a message, some important message. We later figure on that is the plans for the Death Star and how to destroy it. But for right now, all we know is that this army is run by a bunch of people. Their highest general is this man in this clunky black robot suit, and these white people behind him are the stormtroopers. Even if you're a fan of Star Wars, it's a big joke that the stormtroopers can never hit their targets. They do. I actually before starting this video, I actually quickly went through and watched the scene, and I was actually surprised they did hit a couple rebels. So good job for you, little stormtroopers. You hit something. Good for you. But they didn't hit much, and most of the rebels got away alive. And then we figure out about the message that Leia's taken away, right? So what we can figure out based on this about who the villain is that he's supposed to be intimidated. Now we're going to get into my personal opinion, right? And this is somewhat, I'm trying to make this not just my personal opinion, but I'm going to have to bring up my personal opinion. And you guys can tell me your thoughts, how wrong I am about this. But I don't think that Vader is intimidated. He's not intimidated. Like, yes, his voice, voiced by James Earl Jones, is supposed to be intimidating, and I can't say anything against James Earl Jones because he's a legend and he does his best with a terrible villain, but it's a terrible villain. That's the fact of the matter is, who in their right mind can find a clunky robot monster with asthma intimidated? I'm like, that's the best way to explain him. He's a robot monster with asthma. Some Star Wars fans, it might be like, that's a terrible way to explain him. But is it though? bad breathing. It sounds too much like asthma. And as someone who, growing up, I had asthma. That's the best example I can think of, is a clunky monster with asthma. And I don't find that intimidating. The only time that I ever found Darth Vader intimidating is that of the moment in Revenge of the Sith when he goes in there, and I've talked about this before, with this hood up, and he just goes, closed door, kill all the people there. And he's not in this clunky monster suit yet. He's just red eyes, hood up, Anakin Skywalker killing a bunch of people. And that's the best Darth Vader you can get. I hear that in Rogue One and in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that he's better, but I've even come upon memes of Star Wars fans saying Darth Vader in the original trilogy, and it shows this little puppy. It's like Darth Vader in the other Star Wars movies, and it shows this like monster of a dog. It's like, that's kind of true, because the fact of the matter is, in the original trilogy, he's not that intimidating. People like to say he's really intimidating, and I don't get it, because he is, again, a clunky monster with asthma, and that's the most he has going for him. So, that's somewhat my personal opinion, and also some Star Wars fans would have to say that he's not intimidating too. So, I'm just saying. On to the next part, which is the stormtroopers, his army. I've talked about before about how set it up that your army, the army of your villain, is very important, because who's backing them? Who is there? The people who are behind them. You don't have to just give for the villain. You have to give for the whole army, right? For all the talk about, maybe Sauron is not the best villain. You have to admit that he is an intimidating villain, and the Nazguls are intimidating villains. The orcs are intimidating villains. All these monsters that are behind him are all intimidating too. So it makes him even more intimidating, because it is a bigger force. But the problem is, and even Star Wars fans agree with this, the stormtroopers is a big joke how they can't hit anything. So not just are we having this clunky monster with asthma as your big villain, and then his whole army cannot hit a single thing. How intimidating can this be? So what can we learn from this, right? So I've already basically talked about it before. But we can learn that setting up your villain, intimidation. You need to make your villain intimidating. First of all, we don't really understand his motivation. And he's not intimidated. And his whole army's not intimidated. Because the fact of the matter is, while I don't agree with everything about J.R. Martin and his idea of intimidating villains and all, I do have to agree with one thing he said, right? In his books, he says that he always wants to make it so any character can die at any time, right? The character goes out an alley, and that he might be able, it might be a chance that he makes it out alive, or he might not. Anybody can die. Unless it's in the later seasons of Game of Thrones. The point is that is what I'm talking about. Then the villains are intimidated, because anyone can die. Anyone can die. That means no one is safe. In Star Wars, you might say, hey, Obi-Wan Kenobi dies in the first movie from Vader. Like, oh, that makes him intimidating. But if you look back, Obi-Wan Kenobi allowed himself to die. He, on purpose, allowed Vader to kill him. So it wasn't because Vader killed him. It was because he on purpose allowed Vader. The point is, no main characters in Star Wars, as far as I remember, actually dies in the series because of the villain. The villain doesn't kill anyone that's its importance. And does that mean that they have to kill someone of importance, right? In Lord of the Rings, they didn't kill anyone of importance. They killed a bunch of other people, but they didn't kill anyone of importance. Plot armor, right? That's because of plot armor. But it's also because those characters are actually necessary to have. The problem is, this is the big thing with wrong. I make whole videos talk about what's wrong with J.R. Martin's interpretation of how story writing should go. But for right now, I'll just say this, right? Making a character able to die does not mean that you have to kill off main characters. If a character is necessary to the story, keep the character. but you can kill off side characters, right? And even in Lord of the Rings, you do have characters who are built up in more main characters. And you have Boromir, you have Theoden, you have characters like that all die, who you wouldn't say they're the main characters, but they were kind of, in a way, main character-like. They were side characters, but there's other characters. In the Lord of the Rings, they do a good job saying even if technically, also Gandalf dies, but he comes back, so we're not going to count that for right now. You still want to have some characters, main characters, who survive. You don't have to have the main character die. You can have side characters die too. In Harry Potter, this is a perfect example, right? None of the main cast dies, unless it's like in the last movie you have some main characters die. The first death that really shocked people was Cedric Diggory. The point is, even that he wasn't a main character, it was something like he's a kid at that school, he actually gets killed, all that kind of stuff. It makes it like Voldemort is a very friendly type guy. In the Lord of the Rings, you don't have all the main fellowship die, right? You don't see like the main characters die. It doesn't mean that there's always behind every corner there could be death. It's not that they couldn't kill them off, as he showed with Gandalf, right? People like to push past, like, well, Gandalf came back from the dead and all. But he did die. He did die. So it's just, that's the first example. And then we have Boromir who dies in that same movie, right? It shows that main characters can die. The world is not perfect, but characters can push past that. Even Frodo, in the end of the Two Towers book, is thought to be dead, but he's actually alive. They get captured, all that kind of stuff, but they don't go as far as they get killed. But it shows that the characters in Lord of the Rings are not they're not perfectly safe. The villains, you have these exposable armies of men who get a lot of times killed, but it shows that they can get killed, right? You have the catapulter of the heads, right? Those are not just random people. Those are people. Those are real people who got killed there. So that's what I'm talking about. You can have your main character survive while still killing off other characters and showing how friendly the other villain is. Showing how friendly the villain is, while still feeling like the main characters can die, because you do have some characters who are building up to be the main characters in the story die. So anyways, guys, tell me your thoughts. Do you guys think that A New Hope did a good job setting up a villain? Do you agree with me that you think that making your villain not intimidated, making your villain's army not able to kill anyone makes it so they can't be intimidated at all and not a friendly villain at all? Tell me your thoughts below. Do you agree with that? Again, I've said this before and I'll try to say it again. Try for 10, get at least 5 friends to try to subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. Please comment below any thoughts you guys have. This has been the Movie Night Reviewer. Peter Wary, signing off.